Hello, everyone. This is John Gazvinian, and you're with Scholars to Storytellers, where we help senior academics in the humanities and social sciences make the transition to writing for the general public, writing trade books, getting agents, getting from a concept to an agent-ready proposal in a short amount of time. Um, you may notice something slightly different about today's video, which is that I'm not alone. I am here with the incredible Billie Olds, who most of you are probably not familiar with, but you will be and you should be, because she's a terrific guru who helps people grow their businesses. Now, you may be thinking, why the hell do I need to hear from someone who helps grow businesses? But stay with me. So Billy has been really helpful to me as we've grown Scholars to Storytellers. And if you value anything that we've done, you should know that we've been around for less than 3 years and we've been growing very quickly. And that is, thanks in part to the lots of great advice I've been getting from people like Billy. So I really trust her. And I really am a big believer in what she has to say. And I hope you will see the value of this as well. But to come to the question of why we are talking about business and entrepreneurship today, some of you may have received the email that I sent a couple days ago, in which I asked you a question, which was, do you want an off-ramp? Do you want to get the hell out of academia? We need to just, I think, not mince our words, be honest. I have, in the past few months, seen and heard directly from so many of you the anxieties that you're feeling since the macro changes that have taken place in our world and in our lives and in our country over the past few months. I know a lot of people are feeling stressed and scared, and some of you have done what I think is a smart thing, which is to join Scholars to Storytellers and actually try to get a trade book out so that you can get your relevance out there to the general public. But I know that some of you are still feeling kind of nervous about the big picture, right? Will I have a job? Will I have a career in a few days, a few years' time? Um, are they coming for me? That kind of stuff. So it occurred to me as I spoke to more and more people that there is a larger existential concern that's beyond just like, hey, I want to do a trade book. For some people, that's not enough. For some people, I think there is a need to develop a psychological cushion, a psychological, I'm going to mix my metaphors now, parachute or sort of safety net, um, where you might be able to feel like, hey, if this professor thing doesn't work out, maybe there's an alternative career for me. Maybe um, there's an off ramp, and I'm mixing my metaphors even more. But I know that for some people, there's also just simply the smart thing of, hey, maybe I need to develop a side hustle. Maybe I need to develop a side gig, just a little something to do on the side that's interesting, that keeps me from spinning my wheels and going insane over things I can't control, and actually, channel some of my skills and energies into a productive direction. Maybe even makes me a little bit of money on the side, and maybe, just maybe, could turn into an alternative career at some point. Or perhaps if and when the time comes when you either need to pivot or want to pivot away from your comfortable tenured professorship, you have something else you can do. And that, even if you don't end up doing that, builds a certain level of psychological comfort. It takes away some of that anxiety. You have options, you have a diversified set of options. So, all that being said, I'm going to try to shut up now and tell you why I brought Billy on, because what I am considering doing is possibly partnering with Billy to offer a coaching program that is much bigger than just how to do trade books, but a sort of 90-day, coaching program, group coaching program. We don't know exactly what it would look like yet, and that's where your input is helpful. Um, but one that basically helps you within, let's say, 90 days, get from where you are right now to, which is, a successful, respected academic or professor, to where you might want to be 90 days from now or 120 days from now, which is a respected, esteemed academic professor who also has a side gig that they can do that actually channels their real skills, right? And let me say what I mean by that. And why I think I've always felt that our demographic, our community is a really unique one. A lot of people don't really understand it. One thing that I think people struggle to understand is, you guys, when you go into academia, you've spent 20, 30 years building this incredibly specific set of skills and knowledge that most people don't even understand. And that even when you explain, most people don't really see the point of, if we're really honest about it with ourselves, or see it as a kind of a nice to have kind of esoteric thing. But we've never thought about what else you could possibly do with those skills, right? And I think for a lot of academics, look, a lot of you guys, you love your jobs, it's great, good. And let's hope that you ride this out into retirement. But for some of you, there is this feeling of like, Well, yeah, I don't really like what I'm doing, but like, and I'm scared, but I don't know what else I could do. Because since I was 24 years old and I went to grad school, all I've been doing is studying, the anthropology of this one particular subculture of this one, region of Slovenia or what have you, right? So what else, what could I possibly do with that? Well, what we're here to do today, I hope, is to give you a little bit of hope and to say there are other things you can do with, yes, even with those very specific set of skills. So let me shut up there and bring Billie on board. Billie Olds helps people scale up their businesses. She's helped me, as I said, um, and we're considering working together to help you. So, Billie, do you want to say a few words, introduce yourself, and just kind of, riff off everything that I've said?
It's a lot, John. But let me start by saying I'm deeply honored and touched to be with you and that you reached out to ask about possibly partnering to serve these scholars who serve all of us and have done so since we were small children. I recognize the importance of educators in our life and in our society. So I'm particularly touched to be here. Thank you for that. Um, and John is right. I'm a little bit different than all of you in that actually I dropped out of university to go ride horses and then segued into helping people organize the structure of their businesses. In doing so, I've spent the last 20 years working in every industry, trade, and business that you could probably imagine, all the way from riding horses to creating stainless steel process vessels for pharmaceutical ultra pure water. We've done some really interesting things. And what I've learned over the years is that there are a few fundamental commonalities in all businesses. And that's the thing I'm excited to share with you. And it's something that John and I have been speaking about. Boy, it's been at least 3 years now since we met down in Paraguay.
I think that's right. Yes. Yes, I met Billie in South America. Don't ask. It's a long story, but she absolutely inspired me. This is that I had just started Scholars to Storytellers when I met her. So
And it's been an absolute delight to watch it blow up the way it has. And I'm particularly proud of the event that you are hosting that's coming up quite soon.
that
That,
happened already. That
oh,
the
it did
retreat
happen.
that
Oh, I'm so sorry I missed the
yeah,
dates.
it's okay.
But it was incredible to see the huge response to that immediately for a first time event. So we really know that you're onto something in supporting our scholars in finding these alternate paths. Because these are rocky times, and we don't want any of you to feel trapped or to feel that you don't have options because the reality is far different.
So what would you say to someone who is a tenured professor who's got a pretty decent life and a decent job and a 401k and all that and everything's kind of comfortable at a elite university somewhere in the United States, um, in the humanities or in the social sciences, a historian, anthropologist, a sociologist, etc. Who isn't in danger of losing their job tomorrow, right? But would like to explore other options. What would you and feels, hey, I don't know, I can't do anything else. All I know how to do is teach sociology and do research and write academic articles and maybe at most work with John to do a trade book. But what else would I do? It's been 20 years since I worked a job that's outside academia, right? What would you say to someone like that?
I would start by saying these are very common issues that I hear from people, especially in the academic world. Right? You have been programmed along a very specific trajectory, and it is the same sort of trajectory that you pass on to your students. It is not a negative programming. It is simply a progression of skills and knowledge, right? But entrenched in that are very prescribed ways that we must do things. And what happens is that we fall in line with these prescribed ways of thinking. So we believe that we can only do one very specific thing because that is what we've been told, and we've sort of channeled ourselves into that track. Again, the reality is far different. John mentioned a very important word earlier. To me, that is the word pivot. A pivot is a planned and executed strategic movement, right? So this is something that we're doing to enhance the play. We're on the basketball court. We're pivoting as a planned movement to improve the flow of the game, to move the ball where it needs to be. Hugely important. That is very different than a veer. So when we're veering, it's a reactive response to something. and it sends us off kilter. It throws us off balance, and it scrambles our lives into a million pieces that they don't need to be in.
Right.
And in that moment, our programming stops serving us immediately because we don't have the skills in place to look inward and find what we can do, and more importantly, which problems we can solve for other people, businesses, or institutions. And that is the key here, in my mind, is being able to find solutions to serve others outside of this prescribed lane that we've placed ourselves into.
Yeah, no, I love that. This idea of pivoting versus veering. I think a lot of people, I sense a lot of the people in my community, in our community, have been sort of reeling, right, since since the election, basically, and feeling helpless, feeling out of control, out of they have no control over things, right? Somebody else is in control of this narrative, looking at not quite sure what to do. And I love this mentality of, you take the reins, like make sure that you have options, right? You may have a plan in place, like, you don't have to, freak out and leave your job, but just do something on this, develop some other alternative. Um,
Exactly. I also want to say, John, I think it's important that we diversify our interests. I was a scholar in my own right of the sport of dressage, which, for those of you who don't know, is where you prance around wearing a top hat and a tailcoat, and it looks like the horse is dancing. They're not. That's a different story. But I studied this sport. I studied the history of the sport, the masters of hundreds of years, and really immersed myself in this lifestyle. And that's all I knew. I didn't develop other skills. I channeled myself into that particular pipeline because it was really interesting for me. But what happened is at one point I got hurt and injured my back. I was no longer able to compete. I was no longer able to, even care for the animals very well. And I put myself in the position where I had to veer, and it was horrible and it was depressing and it was really scary. And I realized that having a platform and a place to share the idea that you are never stuck, you are never limited, as long as you understand that options are there and you look for them. You look for these different ways that you can serve and pivot so that you're not in a position I found myself in 15 years ago where you're completely reinventing yourself and having to find a completely different way of life that feels foreign. We can start adding some of these components to our lives now in a very gentle way. And for the tenured professor at a beautiful, well-decorated university, awesome. I'm so thrilled for you. But what about retirement, guys? How many of our peers or family members have we lost after retirement? And I'm this is not hyperbole. I've experienced this in my own family. People lose a lot of their sense of identity when they are no longer actively participating. So why not create for yourself another way of actively participating and providing something beneficial to the society so that you still feel nourished, so that you're still able to share your skills and your voice, even when you're perhaps removed from the university setting. And I think that's something that we overlook far too often in our society.
Absolutely. You're right. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. A lot of us are going to be living a long time, I hope. So, we do need to be thinking about that. So let me drill this down into some nuts and bolts, right? Because I think we've been having the conversation so far on the level of kind of abstraction. Um, Specifically, let's say I'm a professor and I want to join. And again, and by the way, guys, Billy and I have not talked in detail about what this might look like, or even if we're going to do it, right? So this is kind of a soft launch, a kind of trial balloon to see if you guys are interested. So a lot of this has to do with your reactions. So if only like three of you write in and say this is cool, then we're not going to do this. But if you guys are interested, do let me know, and do let me know what you'd like this to look like. We're at your disposal. But let's say we put together some kind of coaching program. Um, and let's say I'm Professor X who decides to join, and what would that look like? Well, what would we do you think we'd be doing? Let's say we have like a few months together. Where do we start? Like, okay, hey, I'm a whatever anthropologist, sociologist, whatever. How are you going to help me start a business that channels my skills?
So we do a couple of different things.
Because, sorry, your audio is just a little.
Oh, I
Okay.
apologize. Is that better?
Because yeah, because by the way, before you answer, I should also say Billy, because Billy, the reason this inspired Billy does this with other kind of communities and groups as well, where they'll work together as a group for like 90 days or whatever, and she helps them. This is what I've seen her do. She helps people who are just lost and confused and don't know what the hell they're doing with their lives. I mean, not people like you guys, but like we're talking people guys in their 20s and 30s who are just kind of drifting, who don't have the education you guys have, but or in some cases do, but she helps them fundamentally change the direction of their lives. Basically, put together within 90 days, create a business out of nothing, basically, out of just some ideas, without any money spent, without huge amounts of time being put into it. Some time, of course, but like 10, 15 hours or whatever, here and there during the week, wherever people can find the time. And then within a few months, they are making real money. They have clients. And the best part about it is their income is completely independent of location. They can do what they're doing anywhere in the world. And I know people that she's helped. And so sorry, that's the background. So how would you apply some of those skills? I mean, that same kind of like knowledge set to someone who's coming from academia? What could they expect from something like this?
The first thing that we do is we would assess what you are actually interested in. So most of us that have had one academic track, even if it was informal, such as my own, are really focused on one thing. But there are other interests we've never had the time, energy, perhaps money or freedom to investigate. So the first thing we do is that sort of internal investigation. The second thing that we do is we learn about our money mindset, which I think is really important for anyone transitioning into any sort of entrepreneurship, is that we understand what your relationship is with money, what your generational beliefs are surrounding money, because it is really important, right? The language that our parents and our grandparents use surrounding finances really can impact the way that we feel about accepting money, especially coming from academia, which is so underfunded in most cases. Um, so we would work on our money mindset and understanding the value that we can bring. The next step is to investigate different niches or subsets of businesses and industries that you're interested in. Now, again, I know I'm speaking in abstractions because this is hard. It's a very personal journey for every person that's involved. But I'll give you an example of one of my clients that has given me permission to speak about him. This gentleman's name is Eugene, and he is a world-renowned cellist who is currently in Vienna. He loves being a cellist. He loves playing in the symphony, right? But he doesn't have a tenured position right now. Uh, it's a challenge, it's a grind. Every year or two, he has to audition around the world at these different places. It's so challenging, it's so difficult. The spaces are so limited. And again, the arts are underfunded. So in his case, he wanted to do something that was pushing forward his interest of supporting music education. And what he realized he could do with his experience is that he could help Chinese students specifically who wanted to get placement in European musical academies. So he helps connect them with European professors for one-on-one tutelage or for tutelage to groups in China who are seeking that precise expertise. So he was able to leverage his skills and his knowledge into something that served a business, a Chinese school. Many of those are private schools or language academies, whatever they are, music academies. But he's leveraging that and at the same time supporting the educators who provide these opportunities for the students to learn, thereby moving on to better schools, etc. Right? So he's feeding the entire system with something that most of us would overlook. We would never think of this.
Love it. If you guys are watching this, right, if you're listening to this, I hope your wheels are spinning, right, as you're listening. I hope this is getting the ideas moving, right? Because that's a perfect example of someone who's got a very specific skill that doesn't seem like it's easily leveraged to the outside world. But he's managing to make a living doing that. And I bet there are ways that a lot of you could do that as well. So one of the things that gave me the idea for this. So okay, so I have a little. So okay, let me stop here and just say, I know that you might be listening to this and you're thinking, well, okay, that's all well and good for a cellist, but okay, what do I do? Whatever. My work is so specific. Okay, I have a little surprise for Billie.
Oh.
I did not I warned her when we got on this call. I said, I'm gonna have a little surprise question for you, and I absolutely promise you, and she'll back me up on this, that she has no idea what's coming. Um,
No.
and here's what the surprise, no, it's a good surprise, and we'll edit it out if this doesn't work out. But um when I spoke to you a few weeks ago, I said to you, yeah, I don't know if I should, yeah, this is a good idea, but I don't know if I should do this. Like, what do I do if and I just randomly picked this example out of my head. I said, what do I do if I'm an expert in 19th century German botany, let's say, like I'm a historian of science? How am I supposed to take that skill and, and leverage it into some kind of like side hustle, right? That doesn't make any sense. And you immediately said to me, well, you could make botanical soaps and sell those. You could give workshops on how to produce botanical gin. You could do that for your students, for example. You could all kinds of things, right?
Let
And
me interrupt to say that if you're a nerd like me, who likes botany and knows a little bit about it, you start an edible floral jelly company. Because why wouldn't you?
right, exactly. See, there you go. And this is why I love Billy, because that would never occur to me. Because all I know how to do is help you like get your ideas, make them more relevant and try to get the trade book out there. But she thinks much, much bigger in this way. Um, and so, and by the way, I think the important point here is to say, like, if you're like a tenured professor at Harvard, we're not saying like, oh, just quit your job and start an Etsy, like selling botanical soaps. That's not, I mean, we get it. I understand. And let's just be honest. I understand the whole prestige thing and the fact that you've come up to this, this point in your career and whatever, and you're tenured, and that's amazing. You know, um, we're just saying there are things you could do. And in fact, even that botanical gin example that you gave, I was thinking about that. I was thinking, let's say I am that guy and I just made that person up. Doesn't exist. But what if I started to get really into botanical gins? Now I could have a little workshop I could do that for my class, for my students as well, right? It could be part of the curriculum that while I'm teaching, I could do little demos and things, and that would actually enrich my teaching. It might even enrich my research in ways that I don't expect, actually. And on top of that, I can do little workshops for people who want to like, produce botanical gin, right? So this is the creative
Or
way.
let's go one step further with that, because location independence isn't great when you have a physical product to distribute, right? So instead, I might say, you know what? I'm going to establish myself as the botanical gin expert, and I'm going to work with distilleries and provide my services to them.
Right.
Bam, easy pivot.
Right. So you see, it's like pivot after pivot after each pivot leads to another pivot. Next thing you know, you're still, and again, you're still teaching, you still have your great job. But one day you also, I had actually a pretty good job. I wasn't the tenure track person. I was, as more of an administrator, but I was executive director of the Middle East Center at UPenn. I loved it. I loved that job for 7 years. But you know what? I don't really miss it. And that's not just because of the politics. It's actually because I'm loving what I'm doing. I had never expected, 3 years ago when I started this, I had never expected to just quit my job over it. But the reality is, it's going really well. It's a lot more fun than what we were doing. And so never say never. And by the way, I have a really good friend. I won't mention names, but I mean, tenured up the wazoo, like endowed chair, professor at a very prestigious business school. I'm not going to name names or say any more than that. But literally, I mean, she's like, you know what? 5 years from now, I'm gonna move to Cambodia. I'm just gonna quit my job. So it's like people are in that mental space these days, right? Where, and I know it seems strange because you feel like you shouldn't give all this up somehow. Um, and maybe you don't have to. But having that option is what we're talking about. So let me get to the surprise that I have for Billy. So it's slightly long-winded. But when we had that example, when I threw that kind of I threw what I thought was a really obscure academic thing at her, and she immediately came back with like all these cool ideas. It gave me an idea. I said, when we do this, we should have a little lightning round where I throw at you various types of really obscure academic expertise, and you tell me, and it's okay if you don't may not always have the exact answer ready, but I'm curious to see what you would do if you were this person, right? If your expertise was in this, what kind of business you might start. You ready?
Okay, bring it on. I'm a little nervous, but I'll do my best.
Okay, your audio is a little muffled again, so
I'm not sure what's
there
going
you
on
go.
with this mic.
There
Is
you go.
that right? I'll
When
just
you
lean forward in anticipation.
Yes, yes. You do the Sheryl Sandberg, like lean in. That's it. That's all you have to do. Okay. Yeah, there you go. All right. So let's say, and these are just some examples from people that I have come into contact with recently. So I just threw them down. There are like five or six of these. Let's say I'm a historian whose speciality is the history of vaccinations and public health in the United States from about 1850 to 1940. And I want to start a business. What do you think you would do?
You're good. So a couple of things come to mind. First of all, you could actually do living history demos. Um, I don't know a lot about this field, obviously, but the first thing that comes to mind is the history of like bolus pills. I remember watching a documentary about pills being made in England several hundred years ago. So one of the first things you could do is actually look at ancient pharmacology or historic pharmacology and ways that you could work with current pharmacies and pharmacists for development, like teach them how you can research methodologies, development methodologies, historic additions to their, whether they have a museum, a corporate center, a corporate story, because oftentimes a story is what sells a product, whether it's a vaccination or a lip gloss or a pair of shoes. The story sells. So you are armed to be a marketing expert for many pharmaceutical corporations, just as one example.
Cool. I love it. Um, by the way, you don't have to go and work for Big Pharma. That's not the message here. It's just that you
Well,
have these.
I'm thinking of the like nice, I'm an old lady going through menopause, so I had to do topical hormones, and that comes from a local compounding pharmacy. So in my case, that's a direction I would choose to go. I wouldn't work with big pharma, but I would work with small producers or holistic practitioners and producers. There are many different ways that you can go. If big pharma doesn't appeal to, well, almost any human being, we just pivot and pivot until we find one that does appeal to us.
Yeah. And by the way, one of the many reasons I wanted to work with Billie on this is because don't worry, she's a lefty like all of you guys. Don't worry. You hear business, entrepreneurship, you might have certain assumptions you make, but she's simpatico, she's a fellow traveler. Don't worry.
My
Um,
business model, just to disclose this because I believe in transparency, is the clients I don't like pay me a lot so that I can subsidize working with the people that I really like. And that is my model.
like us. We are basically Billy's charity case. So this is the socialism in action,
People
right? So she basically rips off these like really evil corporations so she can help companies like mine. So you're welcome. Um,
Welcome to socialism, baby. We can play it both ways.
so let's say I'm a political scientist who studies the morality of dropping bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. What could I possibly do? And if I want to pivot into starting my own business? That's a tough one, I know.
It's not actually,
Okay.
because the way I would pivot that is to work on more local campaigns. There are plenty, you can buy and rent mailing lists of voters, of campaign donors, of people who are what are the candidates? That's what I'm looking for, right? So you can buy all of these lists or rent them really inexpensively. I would create a product to serve probably as the local grassroots campaigns. They don't have a huge amount of money. They need the storytelling desperately. Again, for any of you, it's all going to be at the storytelling that you possess. And we can spin that in so many, and by spin, I mean this in a positive way. We can turn that and dial that into many different opportunities. But the first thing I would look at is how can I help current campaigns understand how to reach the populace based on history that we've seen in our within our lifetime
Hmm.
or our parents' lifetime.
I love that. That
So
makes
it's a
so
pretty easy sale.
that makes so much sense to me. You're so good at this, actually. Honestly, it's like actually I didn't know how this was going to go, and you're like, wow, that makes so much sense. Yeah, if you're like a anti-nuclear campaign group, and you have someone who can actually, yeah, help you think differently about this stuff and be more effective, right?
Exactly.
Um,
And it's not frightening to reach out to a small local campaign.
mm,
The mayor of Podunk, Idaho is not a race that's as overwhelming as the mayor of Los Angeles.
right.
Right. So we can apply our energies where it makes sense and where it feels right, not necessarily where the larger purse is.
So let's say I'm an anthropologist who studies how tourism affects national identity in the Caribbean.
Well, that's kind of, I mean, there are a couple of things I could do there again. I could work with the purveyors of tours in a specific location to help them make it more culturally accurate and to provide different materials. Perhaps it's a book, perhaps it's outputting videos. And you could be the director, you could be the writer, you could be the face, um, just as a starting point. Or you could do something the same at home, prepare trips to the Caribbean that prepare people culturally for the cultural history of that place and give them access to traditional clothing. A good example of this, I'm kind of embarrassed to admit it, but not really because it's the most comfortable thing I own, is that I am wearing my Pakistani outfit today because I love wearing local Pakistani clothes. They're really comfortable, especially in the heat. I like the cultural significance of that. And because I treat it respectfully, it's not cultural appropriation, or so I've been told by my friends. Um, and I'm
You're
wearing this too,
you're
I'm
gonna
wearing these outfits when I go to Pakistan in a couple of days as well. Um, I
you're gonna
can
launch
use that, and many people will if given the opportunity. When I was in Saudi, I was in an abaya, right? When I'm in these different places, I have the garments, the garb, and the basic knowledge to go there and be a good tourist. But somebody has to create those opportunities. Not everyone's a maniac like me who's going to research for a week to make sure that they don't make tremendous gaps in this new place.
you're gonna launch a massive debate about cultural appropriation with this crowd. I'll tell you that
It'll
right
be really
now.
interesting. Full disclosure, I am marrying a Pakistani man. So he has helped pick out some of the outfits and has sent them to me in advance of my next visit there. So
You know,
treat
I
me
didn't even know that.
kindly. It's kind of under wraps. Keep it, yeah. I'm totally open to seeing the comments in the chat, and if there are better ways for me to deal with things, you let me know. But in the for the time being, uh, I'm enjoying understanding these different cultures. And on every trip I take, particularly interested in visiting the Middle East more, every trip I take, I want to learn. I'm hungry to learn and to sift through the nonsense that we're fed. And you have the opportunity to be those voices, which are very compelling to people like me. And I will pay a lot extra to go on a trip with people that I feel have the right morality and who really want to share something with me rather than just taking me to the tourist locations and taking my cash.
Absolutely. Wow, that's thanks for sharing that news. Congratulations. I had no idea. So um let's say I'm a population health scholar who studies maternal mortality.
Where did you start with that? You could partner with something like the Washing Machine Project, which is a really cool project that I love, where they make collapsible hand cranked washing machines because about 80% of the world still washes their clothing by hand. Now imagine what the laundry needs are in a maternity ward in a country where electricity and water are not abundant, as we are so fortunate to experience. Simply introducing partnerships and projects, marrying those together could be a space for you. It could be that you go on a lecture tour. It could be that you do fundraising for different causes. Because I hate to break this to you, even those of us working in the charitable world get paid. You deserve to be paid for your efforts,
Mhm.
whatever that reasonable number is in your heart and in your bank account. Um, but we can expend our energies that way, take payment, and still serve others in a charitable fashion. Again, so many different ways you could spin that. And it could be something as simple as reusable diaper drives to serve hurricane hit municipalities, right? It could be anything that really resonates with you personally.
Love it. Let's say, okay, this is a curveball for you. Let's say I'm a classicist who studies stinkiness in the ancient world.
I would work with companies that make children's products and candy because they like gross things. Children love gross things. Many people are fascinated by stench, by odor, and because we're so far removed from understanding what it's like to have, human waste in our streets on a regular basis, Um, one thing that you could do, honestly, is you could set up stench tours in the way
Mm.
that people have horror houses that you walk through. Why not have a stinky house?
I love it. I love it. You're actually really good at this. I'm like floored about her. Guys, she did not, I swear to God, she did not see this coming. This is like really good. All right. Let's say I'm a scholar of Tolstoy and Russian nationalism.
I mean, again, you could do a million things. So you could take people on historic tours. You could uh, have native Russian dress uh, parties. You know, you could literally host things where you're bringing a treasure trove of costuming if that's your interest. You could advise fashion designers on historic motifs and uses of, you know, fabrics, perhaps historic dyes. And there, I know that Tolstoy is your interest, but this is again where we talk about pivot. I don't know enough about him. I don't know enough about him in his life to give you a better answer.
Right.
But the broad answers are, you know, maybe you make a Tolstoy brand of cross country skis in homage.
I love that. All right, last one. You're a historian who studies Christian Zionism and British and French colonialism in the Middle East. Getting controversial now.
I would do something with food. Food
Food.
binds all people, right?
Okay.
So I would wonder about, I would try to find the ties that unite in
Mhm.
that case if I were spinning it into a business.
Mhm.
Food and food is the primary. I was going to say food and music, but obviously that is not true in some cultures.
Yeah.
Um, but everyone eats.
Yeah.
So I would find some way of time marrying those things together. Or providing again historic tours, historic lectures, making myself available and talking about the components that are less known. You know, that little rabbit hole that you perhaps dove down in grad school, but
Mhm.
didn't have the time or your curriculum didn't allow you to further investigate. That's the rabbit hole I would follow and find the opportunities to pivot from there.
I love it. How was that? Not too painful?
Very.
No, I mean some of these are really tough. I mean, I have to be honest with you. So like I respect the hell out of what you're doing here. So guys, I hope you understand what we're trying to play out here. Obviously, she doesn't know who any of you are. But if you know what Billy's very good at is like talking to you. And actually if we ended up doing some kind of coaching program, and again, we'll only do it if you guys are interested. But if we end up doing it, you would be getting a lot of one-on-one creative brainstorming time with me and Billy potentially. I don't know, whatever. And those of you who have done individualized coaching with me, hopefully will can attest to how useful that can be. Those like long Zoom calls where we kind of let things go whatever direction they're going to go in, so that we can figure out really what's the heart and soul of what it is you're trying to do and how to tap into that. Um, so yeah, I don't know. Any final thoughts? I mean, what else?
The best that I can leave you with is to go into the world over the next few days and look at things with that childlike curiosity that we often forget about. When you go to the drive, when you go through the drive-through or to your favorite coffee house, wonder, how did these beans get here? Who harvested them? Where did they get roasted? What happens to the waste products? Who maintains the machinery? How did this get installed? Right? How does this work? Where do cups come from?
It's such great advice. Yeah, and then somewhere in the midst of all that, you may see a connection to your particular area of expertise in ways that you wouldn't have predicted, right?
Exactly. But it wondering, actively wondering to yourself as a child really helps. And one thing that I often advise clients to do is carry a trinket in your pocket. Something, it could be a lollipop, it could be a little matchbook car, it could be a little stuffed animal. I don't care what it is. The object is immaterial, but it should be a trigger to you
Mm.
to tap into that childlike sense of wonder that you have always possessed. And sometimes we need those reminders as adults, guys.
I love that. And frankly, as academics, we probably need that more than anyone, right? Because we sort of squash that side of ourselves in our training. Over the years, we learn how to not, we learn a different kind of curiosity, right? A sort of intellectual curiosity. but that sense of childlike wonder, that's such a nice note to leave things on, actually. I think that is so useful, not just for what we're talking about here, but also for those of you who are interested in trade books. I mean, I think that's really what we're trying to tease out of you, right? That little spark. What is it that's so exciting about this project? Why do you want to write about this? And not the academic answer, but like the answer that comes from the heart. That's what we're looking for. So,
And you deserve that.
yeah,
Whether it's a side hustle or whether it's a transition for you, you deserve it. It's achievable. And if you want us to help, we're standing by. John and I love spending time together. It's been too long, and we love sharing our energies with you. So thank you for letting me be part of this.
absolutely. This has been such an honor. I always learn so much from you. And if you want to see more of Billy, let me know. But really, this is over to you. Total experiment. Let me know. Do you want something like this? Would that be useful? What shape should that take? What would make you most likely to want to kind of participate in something like this? Really, I'm all ears. I'm really open to you. You always know how to reach us. Just reply to any of my numerous emails that I send you, or just john@scholars2storytellers.com. Billy, do you want to plug anything or kind of tell them how they can get in touch with you
You
or
are welcome to check me out. Again, my name is Billy. It's on your screen. My company is called Boss Cooperative. Um, as John mentioned earlier, I have a bunch of different revenue streams, different companies, but this is the one focused on having a global team of really amazing people who've helped me tremendously, who can serve you as well. And we're all about inspiring people to try.
And the word we haven't used yet, by the way, is freedom. And that's one of the things I like about, I know that's not always the most fashionable word in academia, but and it can have many different valences and different meanings. But I've been thinking a lot about academic freedom recently. As it's been obviously something that's been on all of our minds. And it occurred to me as we were talking about this that there is another version of academic freedom, right? So there's the academic freedom that we all know is under threat and that we've all been worried about over the last year or two. Um, but we can make our own academic freedom. And by that, I don't mean, the standard classic like tenured, you say whatever you want because you're a tenured professor kind of academic freedom, but freedom from academia is also just as important. Freedom while we're in academia, of course, is very important, but that's way above my pay grade at this point. But I also want to really talk to you guys about freedom from academia and from all of the stresses and strains and anxieties that it's producing in all of us right now. And again, not because we all have to leave our jobs today, but because there is a sense of freedom that you buy yourself when you have options. So think about that. Get in touch with me if you want to talk more about this and if you want to see more of this. So thank you, Billy.
Thanks, John.